Live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, July 8th, 2024. Time for another show, and boy, everything's going wild today. I was trying a little experiment with the audio recording, and it's gone kablooey, but I think I've got it corrected now. I think I had a little bit of echo going on during the playing of the intro music, but we had this fabulous idea floated here by the way, college graduate number one, who's been helping me out with production for, well, he's been doing a lot of the research that we need behind the scenes. Find me this, find me that. Whenever I remember an article that I haven't put aside in Pocket and realize, oh yeah, it's floating out there somewhere in the ether, I need to find that and be able to give it to Scott. And he's been helping out with that research. And, well, we figured, all right, well, why not also put him to work on the audio side of all of this? Because, you know, what the hell? It's another skill. He's done a little bit of editing, apparently, doing, you know, YouTube streams and stuff like that. So he agreed to help out, and right off the bat, he immediately has this great idea of, why didn't we do this a long time ago? Record all of the audio of all the various inputs, yours, Greg's, the soundboard, everything, through different channels, and just give me all the different channels synced up, and then we can do things like edit out if, every once in a while you drop the microphone in the middle of the show or something, or knock your cup over, or the doorbell rings, or they decide to trim the grass outside the window, and that would make it that much easier to just silence one channel at a time instead of having to worry about, okay, well, if I try to edit this thing, it's going to screw up everybody else, or you're not going to hear what Greg says, or what have you. And it was like, duh, why was that not obvious from the beginning? And so I spent a lot of time, of course, setting up this other channel, but I'm still not sure it was working correctly. And then so I said, all right, I'll switch to the old one because it's coming up to time to run the show. At which point, by the way, Justice pointed out to me, hey, there's no morning post announcing the show today. And in my haste, I forgot to even put one of those up. So it's a little hectic this morning. Plus, of course, we won't have the awesome double or multi-channel recording. Although now I think I probably could have done it if I had silenced everything. So the intro music was echoing because there were two sessions running, recording this thing, and then I guess melding them both into the stream. So that came out a little bit weird. But I think we got it fixed and it's up and running. Everything was working good, and on the fly we managed to make it work even in the old school fashion. So that's pretty good, because in days past we would have panicked and shut the whole thing down. So here we are. Oh yes, and none of the other things are done. I didn't put the morning post up. I don't have any of my alarms set. All of the good things that usually go along with setting ourselves up for a successful week of shows. So, welcome to our next unsuccessful week of shows. we'll blow it every time. How about that? Okay. Well, many things to catch up on, of course, and a jam-packed weekend of, let's see, more speculation about what should Biden do and how should he do it, even if he does want to do anything at all. And is he fine? Or no, I guess not. Or you should be doing this to reassure me that you're fine and you're not doing that. At the same time, we have Trump making everything worse, as usual. You know, Trump being Trump, but then, of course, the media then deciding, well, if it's Trump being Trump, then we don't really need to report on it. It was also a big weekend, though, for Project 2025, as we mentioned on our way out of the out on Friday, and I guess the last half of last week. And then culminating in Friday, we were talking about how much discussion there was of late of Project 2025. And apparently this has gotten back to Team Trump. And I guess they thought the interesting thing that they didn't come out and own it the way Chris Rufo would usually counsel them to do. And that was part of Friday's discussion when we were reading Amanda Marcotte's article about the subject and saying, this is part of the Chris Rufo school of approach to these things, is be upfront and say out loud, I'm going to do this and I'm going to tell you that it's this thing and it's really going to be the other thing, but I'm telling you that the press will print this other thing instead, and then we'll laugh at you after we implement our program. But apparently they went old school on it and just said, well, let's just deny that we have anything to do with Project 2025. Trump will say, I don't know what it is. And that may be true. I mean, he may have been intimately involved in organizing the thing, but may have no idea either that he did it, or no idea what exactly it was that they were doing, or, he could know exactly what it is and he's just lying his ass off. It could be any of those things. So that was a big development over the weekend, driving Team Trump to move into denial mode. But the bigger news, I guess, and as Greg is getting ready to join us, the bigger news, I knew this would be big news, the elections overseas, both the British elections on July 4th, which Greg hasn't yet gotten a chance to comment on, but you know what, he'll do that today, and the French elections, which were both big surprises to somebody. I don't know who. Us, we were surprised. What? There was an election? Because it's a different country, even though Greg told us it was coming up and had told us for a long time. But the outcome, very different from what was being predicted. And either the predictors are terrible, or something anomalous happened, or there's some sort of weird narrative that they would really rather see, or for whatever reason had invested themselves in, that the right was on the march around the globe. And as others have pointed out, not only these two elections, but everybody's, well, I hope everybody's good friend via Netroots and Twitter, Merched, as Zahid had said, good point, that they believed that there was going to be a overwhelming right-wing victory in India, and Modi could not put that together. Well, not in the way that they expected. In the British elections, the collapse of the Tory Conservative Party, and we discussed a little bit on Friday what the results looked like and what we were learning from it, that essentially there were conservative voters either switching parties or staying home, whereas there was pretty good, healthy turnout for others, and that they just happened to, sort of hit the jackpot in Labour, winning an enormous number of seats by a not tremendous vote margin, but still winning nonetheless. And in the French elections, Greg also raised a flag on this one, a tricolore, if you will. Not a red flag, but a red, white, and blue flag, but not ours, theirs. But told us that there was a movement on, as among the Macron bloc and the other leftist party blocs, or Macron being a centrist, or even center-right-ish party, I guess. Or did you describe it that way, or central? Well, he'll come on and tell you. But at any rate, that they had struck this deal, that in order to get in the way of and defeat the Le Pen National Rally Party, or what is it? I don't know, RN, I guess, right? But at any rate, they got together and said, well, look, we're having three-way or multiple four-way races where the Macronist party candidate is trailing, is in third place, as between the other parties. We'll have that person drop out of the race and throw their support to the leftist bloc, and vice versa, where the leftist bloc candidates were running in third or more, that they would drop out in favor of the Macronist candidate. And they did it, and it worked, and they denied a predicted majority to Le Pen. So fantastic. Greg will give you his analysis of all of that. But just, I guess it caught everybody by surprise, a very pleasant surprise. And hopefully it works here too. And that we can continue to, flip seats, retain control of the Senate, gain control of the House. I mean, it was all considered a real long shot not that long ago. But as it happens, where people organize and say, this presentation from the hard right, and they're being very upfront about their programs in all of these countries, this is not what we want. This is not what we're about. We'll do anything to defeat this. And they organize and they come out in numbers and they do defeat it. And I'm reminded also of the very surprising results in some of the statewide referenda on the subject of abortion in some deeply red states where people said this is not what we want. We want to, we'll do what we can to organize, come out in numbers, and make sure that our right-wing government doesn't think it's moving ahead with our consent. To the extent that we can do something to stop this march to the right, we're going to do it. It hasn't always worked in every situation, and I can tell you more about that, but it has worked in electoral situations. It has given them results that have defeated their march towards national abortion bans or any more draconian restrictions, but it hasn't stopped their attempt to march straight past new constitutional protections either. That's a different story, though. Greg Dworkin is here. We're not on separate channels. We're doing our old buddy movie thing on the same audio channel. I was learning a lot about the audio quality and ways for us to improve it over the weekend. But it looks like I'm still working on it. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. Oh, I love that idea. I mean, I can just imagine a show where your son edits me out completely, and then there's you talking, and every once in a while, like every 15 minutes, and then silence.
Right.
That would have been my part, but it was edited out.
Well, there's so much that goes on in between, and the sound, and sometimes in the background, and like we said, the doorbell rings, the lawnmowers are going, Abby's going, and it's difficult
we
to
have that
deal with
sound when I call in. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can cut out.
He wanted that out to it. I was like, well, people are getting used to that.
It's traditional. It's like the music from my washing machine.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Or Abby barking.
This is some of the atmosphere. So I'm not certain that how to give them instructions and to say, well, some of this is ambiance, but anyway, I mean, it was a good idea and it was totally obvious on its face. And he was, he'd been editing things for all of the editing part. Well, actually, I mean, some of the simple stuff, yes, but then as he's getting into let me clean this up and tighten this up and move it for time. I was teaching him along the way, if you're around, I'd love to put you to work on this. And, then he was like, I actually have an idea. Oh, okay, what is it? Oh, yeah, right.
I asked you to help. I didn't ask you for ideas.
Yeah, I know. And then he's like, oh, can I just totally improve everything?
Oh, okay, boomer.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, I guess you can. All right. Well, how do I do this thing
I'm
that you're talking
reminded
about?
of some of the records of
These
the late
kids
Peter
today.
Schickley, who used to record about PDQ Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach's least known and least talented son. And the music was fantastic because Schickley was a great composer. But some of the stuff he recorded was done at the University of Southern North Dakota at Hoople. And it was done from a barn because the radio station would double as the barn. So as he recorded his shows and would speak, you'd hear the cows mooing and some of the other stuff in the background. But it was all part and parcel of the ambiance. Yeah. And so if you edit that stuff out, you don't get what was originally intended.
Right. Well, we're just looking for, like I said, drop the pencil, bumped my head into the microphone.
No, I get all of that. There's plenty of it, too.
But and I didn't even know, it never occurred to me how you would construct such a thing. And I don't know, kids, they just understand
kids these
things.
Days, they know everything.
Yeah, so I'm impressed.
So speaking of kids, let's talk a little bit about the UK first, and then, because that was the July 4th election.
UK. Yeah.
That was Thursday, so I don't think I've been on the show since the UK election. And, of course, a lot of people got that wrong. They got it right. They knew that Labour was going to overwhelmingly win. The exit polls, when they came out, made the BBC and Channel 4 News and Sky News and IT News or whatever it is, everybody gasped when they saw the exit poll, which, like in France, was released 3 seconds after the polls closed.
Yeah.
And their exit polls are relatively accurate, so they give you a good idea of what was going on. And in fact, both in France and in the UK, it worked. So what they saw was an overwhelming Labour win, an overwhelming Conservative collapse.
Yes.
Not as bad as it could have been, I suppose, but more to say about that. And then they saw the third party in the UK, which is known as the Reform Party, Nigel Farage's party.
Yes.
And what they left out, because they were just totally consumed with that, and that's all they wanted to talk about. The Reform Party was originally projected to win 13 or 14 seats. And in fact, they wound up with 4.
Okay, that's less.
The Green Party was projected to win 2 seats. They wound up with 4.
Well, I mean...
And so nobody talked about the Green Party. Everybody talked about the Reform Party. And the Reform Party share of the vote was higher than normal, but not all that different than what the UKIP party got several years ago during the Brexit Leave or Remain debate. UKIP was the Leave party. Nigel Farage ran it. This time, for the first time, Farage got a seat in Parliament, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But basically, Reform didn't do all that much better than UKIP, but it was like all BBC wanted to talk about. And as someone reminded me, well, that's because all the Board of Governors was appointed by Boris Johnson at BBC. And, you know, to give an example of that, one of their headlines on the BBC website was, voters reeling at Labour's coup. And then they changed that to voters reeling at Labour's win. The way that they approached it was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Labour did this. It's terrible. That was their whole approach. And it was like, okay, let's just step back and look at this.
Wow.
What happened is that people did strategic voting.
Oh, no.
What happened is that they hate the Tories so much. It was clearly a Tory loss more than a Labour win. But when they had the opportunity, they would vote for Lib Dems if the Lib Dem has a better chance of beating the Labour, the Conservative person, the Tory person. Or they would vote Labour if that's the case. Labour did quite well in Scotland, taking a lot of seats away from the Scottish National Party, which has had its recent scandals.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And certain key figures in Tory British politics, like Liz Truss, lost their seats.
Well, how'd the lettuce do?
The lettuce won.
Damn, I knew it. Yeah, that's so annoying.
Which was really great.
That's a big deal. Somebody had to lose those seats. They're way down.
Yeah. So, and what happened in the UK, I think, was similar
Prime Minister
to what happened in France. There's a lot of seats now which are marginal seats, which is to say you can't count on them going to one way or another.
Le swing.
And the other person who also lost, which was of interest, is Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, arch-Brexiteer, and the epitome of the upper-class twit.
I wonder why there was so much focus on him. I just didn't know who he was, but everybody was going crazy over his results. So, okay.
Just Google images of him, and you'll get the idea why.
Yeah. Okay, I will do that. Although, what's the guy's name again? Rees-Mogg.
Jacob Rees, R-E-E-S hyphen Mogg, M-O-G-G.
Mogg. All right. And, I mean, normal enough dude, but definitely very. Yes. If you said this is a member of Parliament, okay, sure, great, wonderful. I say, he's a little odd looking.
But he is who he is.
Sure, and he lost. He is who he was. Now he's not that guy anymore.
Right.
Okay.
So often mocked, and with good reason. And so people were quite happy about that. So
he's married
the UK.
to
and then you move over to
Chair.
France. And let me just describe to you this cartoon by Michael Deatter. Very hard to show cartoons on a web broadcast.
Right.
But it was great. You have to picture the Eiffel Tower instead of the Empire State Building, and on the ground is a giant King Kong, except it's labeled Le Pen.
Le Gorilla Pen.
Le Gorilla. So it's great. So
let me take a look here.
Rally.
I'll tell you how great it is.
National, the RN, National Rally.
Yes.
Marie Le Pen's group.
Mais oui, yes.
Was penciled in to win the most votes, if not a majority. People say they might not get a majority, but they're going to get the most votes, and they'll come really close to running the government, because in France it's not the president, but it's the assembly that really makes policy. And when the president and the assembly are of the same party, as they usually are, stuff gets done. When the president and the assembly are of a different party, which almost never happens, but it will this time, maybe. Sometimes it's stalemate. And so then you just say, I give up, I call for a new election, sort of like Italian politics. So we'll see what happens there. But the point is, they were so expected to win that when the French version of the exit poll came out, people were literally gasping. Some of the best video footage was in leftist areas when they saw that the leftists came in first and Le Pen came in third.
Yes.
And the picture of the rightist people just like screaming and yelling and cursing when they didn't win, when they were expecting to.
That's what they're normally doing.
And the graph, usually shown as a half circle, and on the left is the left party, proportional color, and then in the middle is Macron's centrist party, which really is center-right, more to the right than centrist. I
see. Okay.
And then all the way on the right is the RN, Le Pen's party, usually in black. The
like a web chart of some kind.
The leftist coalition is in red, and orange is for Macron's party in the middle. And it happened so unexpectedly that the people doing the graphics for the TV shows were furiously penciling in the actual numbers of seats. And what happened is that the all the way to the right black portion of that half circle proportionally was largest, but the number of seats penciled in was smallest.
4.
Because they didn't have an opportunity to change the graphic presentation until later. So it clearly took them by surprise.
Yes.
So lots and lots and lots of gasps. And our friend Danielle, who is the editor-in-chief of Bolt's magazine, and we sometimes read stories from him, was just entertaining us with all sorts of stories about what was actually going on during this election. And it was just fairly amazing in regard to what actually happened. Let me tell you this one story. So we had set up, and as you pointed out, we had talked about the fact that there was strategic voting here, just like in England, in the UK, Scotland, Wales, where the voters would vote for the Lib Dem if they had the best chance of winning, or they would vote for Labour if they had the best chance of winning. And so there was a lot of strategic tactical voting, as they called it. In England, UK, Scotland, and Wales, the voting system is different. That is to say, it's like ours in the U.S. It's called first past the post. That is to say, whoever gets the most votes wins.
Okay. There's no T involved at all?
But in France, they have rounds. First round, second round. Okay. And so basically what happened is in the first round, you vote your heart.
Okay.
And in the second round, you vote your head. And it turns out to be a much better system. So as we talked about on the show, I think before the July 4th break, what the French decided to do is, first of all, the left, which is split into two distinct parties, very far left and somewhat far left.
Okay.
Mélenchon is very far left, anti-Semitic, not super popular, but the bigger party. And then the socialists, which are the far left, decided to merge, and they would agree to run a unified ticket. And that was the leftist bloc that won.
I see. Okay.
Macron, who called for the election, the Macronists, the Macronistas, were in the center-right. They hate the left, but they agreed with the left that here's what they were going to do in the runoff.
Okay.
If it turned out that the left candidate was in third, Macron's candidate was in second, RN was in first, or Macron's candidate was first and the RN was in second. As long as the leftist was in third, the leftist was going to drop out.
Yeah.
And not run in any runoff, even though they were entitled to.
Yeah.
And by doing so, they would leave it as a stark choice between the RN and whoever. And the Macronists, after some resistance, because Macron didn't want to do this, but was eventually sort of forced into it by everybody in his party saying, we're doing this anyway, the Macronists also dropped out.
Yeah.
If the leftist was in a better position to win. And this worked.
Hey.
Well, let me give you an example. Taniel gave us this example in Cholet. Far-right RN candidate said he was dropping out. Turns out he lied. He got the leftist to drop out, but at the last minute, the RN guy writes in, no, I'm back. And he does it in such a way that he doesn't really give the leftists a chance to do the same.
Watch out for that.
So, dirty trick, and that guy lost. And he lost big because people really hated that when they did that.
Okay.
So that was probably the worst example of a worst person doing this. There was one Macronist who dropped out, and when asked, why did you drop out, she said, well, defeat is one thing and dishonor is something else. We cannot let the RN win. And the bottom line is it just worked beautifully everywhere. And so the Le Pen is not in power, very upset. They thought it was due them. A lot of the newspapers thought it was due them in the United States. Right-wing power eventual, it's going to happen. Somehow their ultimate rise to power was thwarted.
Hey, somehow. Voters.
Nothing ultimate about it. They get the same defeat every single time they do this, and for all we know, it's crested. But that's not covered because that's not the narrative. More about the narrative after the break.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. See, all right, what was that thump? We would be editing that out if we had the ability to do that, but that's ambiance. So we're back, and I have new notes here during the break about the election and people who dropped out, but they all come under the picture. I hadn't seen that you had sent me this picture of Jacob Rees-Mogg in a top hat, and that does make him look rather ridiculous. Although I don't know if it does anything positive for anybody.
It worked for Fred Astaire, but it didn't work for him.
Oh, okay, yeah, right. Mr. Peanut, that's one. Fred Astaire, two. That's it, I think.
Well, Jacob Rees-Mogg looks a lot like Mr. Peanut, so if you can't picture him, that's what he looks like. So I have this little note from Taniel who notes that there were more than 200 candidates who wound up dropping out in France via this agreement. They stuck to it. It worked. The vast majority of the French public didn't want Le Pen's party.
Good. Yeah, well,
so I have a commentary here from Emile Chabal, who, like John Kerry, looks vaguely French. He's professor of contemporary history in Edinburgh. That would be in Scotland.
Well, then he's not.
And he notes a lot of non-French commentators also argue this as if everything must benefit the far right. But this assumes the far right is somehow new. It's not. Its defeat yesterday is a real defeat, and it could deflate as much as inflate its chances next time around. Because like the last 3 elections, the French have defeated them. They keep defeating them. And so that's like important. And he says, to be clear, I'm not saying it's all hunky-dory, but Marine Le Pen, RN, have for a while now been subject to vicissitudes of the French electoral cycle. Their popularity goes up and down. They're part of the political landscape, not an aberration. But they need to be understood as vulnerable to the same process that affect other parties: excessive personalization, demobilization, institutional inertia. They can benefit from favorable context too. So just basically what he's saying is don't assume they're inexorably on the rise. That simply may not be true. Same as the Reform Party in the UK. Same as Republicans here, by the way, I would point out. And that's why everybody's trying to take lessons from here. So we had an election in the UK where the good guys won, the Labour Party. We had an election in France where the good guys won, which is to say
everybody
not
else.
Not Le Pen Party. The reformists beat the hardliner in Iran in their presidential election, for whatever that's worth.
I don't know.
Nobody knows because, Khomeini is still the ultimate voice. Still, that's all news, and be very nice if democratization and, good government wound up winning here too. So we shall see.
Yeah, there's it's been sort of a worldwide trend that everybody is fairly certain that, and I guess I'm sure the polling shows it. The far right in each
let me give you an example
on the rise.
From today's Washington Post headline in their website here. And again, for those of you who are unfamiliar, this is cooperative discussion that David and I do, which is to say we interrupt each other. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
That's why the soundboard's
heard that here.
So hard
you
to
see,
separate
there's this
that.
thing where shut up, I have it already. All right. What is it?
So here's the headline from the Washington Post. Far right's rise in France suffers unexpected blow as left surges.
Uh-huh.
As if the far right's rise in France is inevitable.
Yeah.
It's not.
No. I mean, well.
They haven't risen.
Hardly ever.
So when
there was a
media
Nazi
has
part,
their narrative,
but,
it's very difficult for them to give up the narrative.
Yes.
That's a lesson when it comes to Biden and what he should do. So we'll get to that. But the far right's rise in France, who said the far right was rising in France?
The Germans.
You did.
Yeah.
All you media people said that. You said, we're predicting they're going to be the big. They came in not second, third.
Yes.
What does it mean that they came in third? It means they're not as popular as you said they were. So the narrative cannot fail. We can only fail the narrative. And France's voters failed our narrative by not voting for what we told them was inevitable.
Well, you know those tricky French. They'll just do that just to confound the Washington Post.
Right.
Well, it's good news, and it's good to see, and it happens in a lot of countries. There's some places where I wish we had known that this was possible. If we can just get the Washington Post, for instance, to say, Viktor Orban is inevitable in Hungary, we might have done something about it, but we didn't know.
So here in the U.S., of course, media has been totally obsessed with what happens to Biden, and they should. It's a big story.
Yeah, I mean, he's president.
He's the president. He had a disastrous debate. Everybody agrees. Everybody agrees. He agrees. It was a disastrous debate on last Thursday, a week ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like 10 years, but during that week, his campaign was not, shall we say, nimble in responding to it. But since then, they have. The base appears to continue to support him based on whatever meager polls we have. We do not have accurate internal polls the way they do. Congress has made all sorts of noises about how they would like to have Biden consider stepping down. Biden cannot be forced out for a variety of reasons.
It's very tough.
Perhaps optics is the biggest one. Biden can step down, but he can't be forced out. And so because of that, Democrats are reluctant to openly say he should step down, except for marginal sources in the Democratic Party. Former congressmen, people in safe districts, people who you think are jerks. You're not having James Clyburn and Nancy Pelosi saying other than, this is really interesting. We'll have to see what happens. Schumer's quiet. Right. The people who matter are quiet. And yet,
people who are used to being in that role.
Today's Monday. What does that mean? It means Congress is back.
Wow.
And so now that Congress is back, they're talking about it in person. Mark Warner, a graybeard in the party, wanted to have a quiet, nobody-knows discussion with his fellow senators. Somebody leaked it. He was pissed. So he says, well, we're not really doing anything except discussing the state of the election. However, Congress will get together. And basically, they've got until the end of the week. They have to decide, is Biden staying, in which case we're all behind him, and that may be the outcome, or Biden is going, and we have to give this to Harris, which may be the outcome. We don't know. We do know the public posture, and the public posture, like the public polls, doesn't really matter. What matters is what's going on behind the scenes.
Yes.
We don't know. We can't know. Those who know aren't talking. So we'll just have to wait it out and see. I know you hate that. I know that I say that all the time. I'm not pushing Biden out. However, those who say this is all a media story made up, that's not true. And the reason it's not true is that even before that debate, 3/4 of the public had doubts about Biden's age, and that debate just reinforced it.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was because people saw in the debate, this must be what people are talking about, even if I haven't come to that conclusion, or I don't care, or I thought I didn't care.
Right. We talked about this, I think, last week, and Pelosi nailed it when she said, look, the big issue is what's going on with Biden, not what the media is reporting. Yes, the media is in a media frenzy. Yes, they're awful. Yes, they have an axe to grind. Yes, they're shallow. But that doesn't change the fact it's still an important question to answer.
Yeah.
And the question on the table is not whether Biden is senile. He's not. That's not even an issue. The question is, has Biden had aging issues that have gotten worse over the last 2 or 3 months of stress? And by stress, what we mean is the Hunter Biden trial, travels overseas, sleep deprivation, trying to work out anything with Bibi Netanyahu, who's convinced that even though the rest of the world, including Hamas, is ready to make a deal, he is not, because he knows he'll be out as president if a deal is made. So, or whether he's prime minister or president or whatever, leader, so lots of stress, and Biden has lapses. And are they important lapses? Are they frequent lapses? Are they getting more frequent? This is what Pelosi was alluding to. Legitimate question. Again, we don't have the answer. Only people close to him do. And yet, the base backs him. If black voters back him, if Congress in the end doesn't really have a rebellion, because rebellions need leaders and they don't have one, if it doesn't come to pass, then the party will rally around Biden.
Yes.
And so we'll find out at the end of the week what's going on, because they can't let this, go on and on and on and on. Definitive statements need to be made. Definitive statements by people like Schumer, Clyburn, Pelosi. He's our nominee.
Okay. Well, what often happens when you decide, in fact, that a definitive statement needs to be made by X date, hold on a minute. We'll be right back. Beginning of next week.
But they don't have time. If they do that, then the election's lost.
Oh, dear. Well, we'll see what the statement is, I guess. I don't know. This is, because it's such a big deal, it's just hard to believe that such a statement that they can arrive at it and make it, and they want to avoid that at all costs.
It won't change media coverage, but it will change individual congressmen coming to the microphone and saying, I've considered and I think he needs to go.
Yes,
that's what it's designed to deal with. Not the media. You can't do anything about media.
All right. Well, I got important week.
Well, you can ignore him. And so that's always possible. The other big story, though, as you pointed out, is this Project 2025 thing, which is breaking through despite the media's best effort to not talk about it. and only talk about Biden's
Which is
age.
Odd, because we only know about it because there were some outlets doing some really good reporting on it.
They brought it to our attention, then they stopped talking about it. But Navigator Research has a new poll out this morning. Opposition to Project 2025 grows as people learn more about the plan. After reading 19 proposed policies for Project 2025, opposition went from 49% to 63%, while support for the plan declines from 31% to 24%. So it was 28-15 opposed. Now it's 67-19. That's pretty definitive. Oh, you say, well, that's only when the pollster tells you about it. Well, actually, searches for Project 2025, mentions on social media are exponentially growing. So people are talking about it. They're finding out about it. There's all these anecdotal things about, my non-political friends are asking me about this, and so on and so forth. That's how these things happen. And again, it's only July. It's only the beginning of July.
Yes.
So for that sort of issue, plenty, since it's not something that has to be on the ballot and you need signatures for and all that sort of stuff, there's plenty of time for that to grow and develop, and it seems like it is.
Yes.
The other thing we saw, which made it news again, is Trump denied knowing anything about it. Now, why would he deny knowing anything about it? That's not their usual MO. As you pointed out, it's the Chris Rufo, of course I own this. Right. Suck it up, libs. I love your tears. That's not what he did. He said, I don't know anything about this Project 2025, which on page 27 have something I completely disagree with.
How do I know this? Because
how do I know this? Because I know nothing about it.
Right.
And the fact that half my campaign, including my spokesperson, is working for them has nothing to do with why I don't know anything about it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's an obvious
shame.
Work. But, well, it shouldn't. It's dumb, and it's his only. It's his usual.
But why did he feel forced to do it? Because people are finding out about it and they hate it.
Yeah. Well, this is what he does, even when it's a good thing.
Right, but not talking about his usual reaction to it. What I am saying is that this is a winner for Democrats.
Yes. Okay. So somehow, fine. We've got to start looking now for a way to screw that up.
Right, but, in terms of the election,
yes,
it's not lost.
No, it's trying to call you right now and tell you.
It's trying to call me.
We're not lost. Pick up.
I'm the election. I know where I am. I'm not lost at all.
Yeah.
In other words, whoever the nominee is for the Democratic Party is still in a very competitive position. Much harder now, no question. But this is an election Democrats can win because people really do care about Dobbs and Roe. People really do care about Project 2025 when they find out about it. And when you look and see what happened in the UK and in France, when people decide to rally against this, as they have around the world, including Iran, that could happen in the U.S. too. So I don't think the election's lost at this point. Democrats can lose the election if they keep dithering.
If we try hard enough.
So that's why they have to get it together and figure out what's going on. I know, Democrats, but still. Yeah. Early enough so that they have time, but they don't have a tremendous amount of time.
Yes. I will also remind people, it was kind of implicit in the setup there, but, this is also something of a different election here, or at least it's different from our conventional wisdom where we love to say, well, you can't just run against XYZ. You got to tell me what you're for. And I understand why that is the case. But in the UK, they just said, we're running against the Tories, and it was fine. They won overwhelmingly. In France, well, we're running against the National Rally Party. Okay. In fact, we're dropping out. We're running against them so hard. Yeah, all right, 200 candidates are going to drop out. That's how much we are just against this thing. And, sometimes when that thing is so extreme and so unpopular and yet threatens through, electoral weirdness to take over the country, people say, it's kind of enough to oppose that. I'm actually in favor of that. Especially if you're a coalition between leftist parties and a center-right party to defeat the RN in France. That's generally speaking exactly what they say you can't win an election on here in this country.
Again, let me point this out. And John Storr just tweeted this about a half hour ago to make the point.
Okay.
The website 538, which many people are familiar with.
Yes.
and it does poll aggregation, and it does election forecasting.
Is that it?
Before the debate,
yes,
run by G. Elliott Morris, not Nate Silver anymore. Before the debate, the win probability was Biden 50 times out of 100 and Trump 50 times out of 100.
Well, that's easy math.
You'd call that a close race.
Yes.
Okay. Today they have their new forecast, given everything that's happened.
Drum roll.
Trump 50 times out of 100, Biden 50 times out of 100.
Are we sure this is a new...
Yeah.
Okay. This is not just like, just run Fridays. Okay. Yeah. Hey, so... What? Huge impact from the weekend.
Yeah. So, one was on June 26th, and this one's today. And, the point is there's a lot of election left. Okay. Yes. I mean, all right, so, we know how long it takes. Be disappointed about what happened. Be upset about the debate that you saw. You can't unsee what your eyes saw. Even still, I don't know if you've seen it, but you really should look at it.
You said I saw it, so there
did you?
You go. Well, you said I did.
Looked? I know, but you never listen to me. So you finally looked at it?
I looked at some.
And
I said, but I had been told, oh my God, the world's going to explode, right? So I kind of, believe it or not, everybody would say, you have to look at it. It's worse than you could possibly have imagined. That's why you have to see it. So of course I'm like, he turns into a dragon. He melts everybody. No, he's just there. And okay, he's not doing very well. So I mean, you did a good job in like preparing me for, he's gonna fall off the stage. No, but it didn't make it look good. But it all the talk of it's worse than you could possibly imagine made it easy for me to over imagine and then see this thing and say, well, that sucks. And as opposed to, oh my God, I have to do something, which I'm too late to do it. I'll see what other people are going to do, and I'll see which one I want to sign on with. Okay, but yes, I did see it. And, it didn't impact me the same way because I watched it all out of order and got all the commentary first. I got a lot of spoilers.
Right. So if you want to persist on following the storyline to the end,
I think I have
it's Biden or it's Harris. It's nobody else. That's like abundantly clear at this point. And at this point, it's likely Biden unless something happens that we're not expecting. And, again, we'll see by the end of the week. If you haven't heard anything by the end of the week, that's what it is. It's still a tie race. Suck it up and let's work.
Okay, that's easy. And it seems like the sort of thing you would fall into because of how easy it is.
Yeah. Now, I'm getting yelled at left and right because I'm pointing this out on Daily Kos.
What is that?
And Daily Kos actually has a lot of Biden people who are really upset that this is even a story. But it is a story. There are people who are, let's say, aware of his age. You can't make that go away.
Yeah.
As Sam Shirazi pointed out, the one silver lining in this cloud is that you got Biden's age issue out of the way over the summer. People can now deal with it with eyes wide open and not pretend it's not an issue. So make it part of the campaign. And Biden needs to do a whole lot of it. Look, I know I'm old, but as George Washington told me, you got to stick with it when things get tough. You need a lot of that. You need
I'll agree.
that sort of approach.
It's the only way out. Yeah. So, okay. I mean, it's not bad material. So we'll see. Okay. We'll know by the end of the week. You promise?
Yeah. The other thing is that the New York Times and the Washington Post have declared that Biden can no longer make Trump the focus. Well, get your horn.
Yeah. Okay.
That's bullshit.
All right. Well, I didn't get a chance to play it either, but there we go. Well, yeah, but I have
blame your son.
I can do that. Oh, we would have been able to edit that.
We would have been able to do that, except that,
I can still do with the
bullshit
thing to it and use my other sounds.
You got to do that together.
All right.
Now, one of the things I wanted to point out, by the way, John Della Volpe, who looks at the youth vote, he runs the poll for the Institute of Politics at Harvard, which is a definitive poll. Some reminders here, according to Google. Gen Z is 12 to 27. I don't think we have to worry about the 12-year-old vote at this point.
Well,
yet.
I don't know. The Republicans can't seem to leave the 12-year-olds alone, but, I don't think they're going for the votes.
Right. Gen Z, 12 to 27
Got
years
it.
old. Millennials, like my kids, 28 to 43.
Okay.
I'm older than you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Gen X, the problem generation, 44 to 59.
What?
And younger boomers 2, Generation Jones, 60 to 69.
Okay.
Why am I bringing this up? Because John Del Volpe was looking at the vote in La Belle France.
Oh.
Okay.
Sacre, bleu.
And what they found is that the 18 to 24-year-olds, 48% left, 33% right, which is to say Le Pen. 25 to 34-year-olds, 38% left, 32% right. The Le Pen vote only gets to be a problem when you start getting into the 35 to 49 vote. It's basically older millennials and Gen X.
Okay.
Okay, 36% right, 31% left, and the 50 to 59-year-olds, the one who are smack in the middle of Gen X, 40% right, 25% left. 60 to 69, which is the Generation Jones younger boomers, 35% right, 24% left. And 70 and older, the older boomers, they actually went Macron, 32% Macron, 29% right, and 18% left. So the Le Pen voters are basically 35 to 69. And anybody under 35 voted left. So the idea that the future of France is right and that people are going to vote right, younger people, that's the problem. That's not true, just like in the United States.
Yeah.
The kids are all right.
Why is this? Yeah.
It's the millennials that are the issue and the Gen X people.
I don't understand that. I mean, I'm in it and I don't understand it.
Well, when you were 18, who was president?
I don't know. I mean, I assume this is a Ronald Reagan thing.
That's what I'm saying.
But why?
Because when you grow up with Reagan as the president, you think that's the natural order of things, and it takes the rest of your life to break that spell.
That must
and
be
some
it.
people
I mean,
never break it.
If you're just not paying any attention, like if you were paying attention, you would have heard people saying, hey, yeah, Reagan's the president, but he's actually doing a pretty crappy job with this, this, and this. But versus, I don't know, there's a smiling guy on TV and he's the president, so I guess.
Well, Republicans generally win presidential elections is what you think, even though Republicans haven't really won the popular vote in a long, long time.
You just come away with that idea.
Just come away with that idea. So the Gen Xers, they're the ones that tend to vote most conservative. It's distressing. It's true. You could find other reasons for it, but I blame.
Yeah, it's too bad. But
that's true in France too, and I blame Reagan for that too.
Well, we might as well. There's really no reason not to.
And the kids are all right, is my point. Really.
Okay. Well, that's
not picking on Gen X. It's the kids. They're great.
Yeah.
Well, they vote correctly. They just have to show up. The thing about boomers, you can talk about boomers all you want to. Boomers show up to vote.
Yeah. Well. That's too bad about Gen X, and I guess I see where it comes from.
Boomers, but boomers show up to vote.
Well, yeah. Anyway. Okay. Well, we know whose fault it is anyway.
Yeah.
And we can blame them for it, and we'll do that in the next hour as well.
Right.
Because they're still going to be here. Gen Xers don't go anywhere, apparently.
Right. So there it is. Anyway, that's the state of the art here. When you look around the world, the good guys are winning. When you look in the U.S., we haven't lost. We've had a rough stretch for 2 weeks, but we're far from having lost the election. Don't believe that if you hear it. That ain't true.
There's no reason to believe that. Everyone has shown you the opposite around the world and here in the United States, red states approving abortion.
We got work to do. There's no question about it. If you didn't think we had work to do, well, we do.
It involves voting, and you're going to have
to. It involves voting, campaigning.
That also. Yes, brings us to the, we didn't get a chance because of the timing of the holiday to discuss the New York Times running their July 4th op-ed, Why I Don't Vote, by the guy who votes. Did you catch that one, or were there fireworks going off around your house? A right-wing operative of one type or another wrote I'm just folks, just happen to be interested in this. And so why I don't vote and why, one vote doesn't make a difference. All the worst possible arguments for it. And they chose to run it on July 4th when, you should be saying, actually, it's a great thing to vote, even though there's no voting going on today except in the UK. It's, patriotic duty, et cetera, et cetera. So they run a don't vote thing. And then, of course, as it turns out, the guy is persuading everybody not to vote because you'll never make a difference anyway. And some enterprising person said, wouldn't it be interesting and wouldn't it have been a good thing for editors at the New York Times to do before they run a piece called Why I Don't Vote to check his voter registration and see if he, in fact, does not vote? Because he does. Oh. And what was interesting was then apparently the New York Times says, well, we can still save it. We'll change the headline to Why I Won't Vote. Like going forward, I'm going to stop voting for these reasons that I said used to preclude me from voting, but never really did, until they finally gave up and said, we should never have run this piece in the first place. It was an interesting interlude. And you're lucky if you missed it. So, good.
There's, again, some good news going on here. We're going to hear this week, maybe Thursday, about the consumer price index, but inflation seems to be relatively under control. Here's a report today. U.S. is producing more energy than it consumes to a degree we've never seen before, which is excellent. So there's a lot of good things happening, and, we just got to keep going.
Yes, well, that's good. I love producing energy. I could use some right now, but we'll try it. Well, we'll take a 1-minute break. I will consume some of the energy we're producing. This is true. And it's clean energy in many cases as well, although even for all of the Republicans who scream about we got to be drilling for oil everywhere you can, drill, baby, drill. We're also producing more fossil fuel energy than ever also. But, I don't know, something, economy, yada, yada, Biden old, I don't know. Well, it's happening everywhere. Well, thanks, Greg. You got us started nicely on a Monday. We're not on separate channels yet, but when that happens, that'll be even more exciting. And I appreciate it. Okay, we'll catch up with you again on Wednesday, right? Let's do that, and we'll see if we can't get the channels right by then. I'm missing something somewhere. It's got to get plugged in. I'll turn it off and turn it back on again.
Yeah, that'll work.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here. Where are we? On Netroots Radio. Well, good. At least I remembered that. Okay. Lost my place there for a second as I'm trying to think about which direction to head in hour 2. There's a lot of things, and some of them are crazy. Yeah, well, all of them are really crazy. I'll go back to what I mentioned earlier at the top of the show. I hinted at something where I said, all right, with this theme we're seeing around the world, and to some extent even here in the United States, of newspapers, well, I mean, I guess you could, if they were really doing it this way, you could give them credit for sounding the alarm about the rise of the far right. But really what they're doing is, I don't know, they're reporting on this stuff, but they often report about it in glowing terms. And then we all get upset and raise the alarm about the rise of the far right. And then we react to it, organize against it, go out, defeat it. And then the newspapers say, oh my gosh, I don't understand how this happened. So really, actually, it would be pretty easy to come to the opposite conclusion, that they're doing a terrible job alerting us to it. Although the fact is that they're doing the initial reporting about it. So we gotta, I don't know, I suppose we gotta give them credit for that. But they could be doing a better job interpreting it for us ahead of time. But I don't know, it's keeping us sharp. We'll interpret it ourselves, thank you very much. Even though when you guys say, hey, there's the rise, when the newspaper brings to our attention, there's a rise of the far right. It's usually in the form of, look at this dapper Nazi. And we say, dapper Nazi? How dare you? He's a Nazi. How come you don't talk about him in the correct terms? and then we fight the newspapers. But it seems to be working out so far. But it's a nail biter, and it would be a lot easier to take if the newspapers were saying, this guy is a Nazi, you got to vote against him. And we said yes and did that. But maybe it only works. Maybe we only deliver the votes when we feel like we're also having to push back against those elitist newspapers. Rawr. However, it's happening again. So, as I mentioned, there's some pushback on this idea, and it comes from, of course, the people who are losing. They're on the losing end of this pushback. That is the far right saying, no, we're not losing, so there. And even though I guess it's manifested itself here in the United States in terms of like I said, the pushback on abortion referenda, statewide referenda, either adding an amendment to the state constitution enshrining a right to an abortion, or in the case of Kansas, I think I got in discussing it over the weekend, got I guess what you would say called the procedural posture of the vote backwards. I guess there was an effort by the Republican right-wing legislature to amend the Constitution, which I guess had been interpreted to that point. Kansans will have to tell me whether we got this right, but it interpreted at that point by the courts there to, if not, explicitly enshrine the right to an abortion, they found the privacy rights necessary, as they did in Roe v. Wade on the federal level, found the privacy rights necessary to preserve, a personal privacy interest in access to abortion. But that was coming under threat from the right, saying, let's change the Constitution such that it explicitly eliminates that or overrides that so that we can further restrict abortion, which is, after all, what we figure everyone in Kansas really wants to do, because this is an overwhelmingly conservative state, because we've gerrymandered ourselves into a permanent majority Republican majority in the state legislature, and everyone knows that once a state is colored red on an electoral map, that's it. There's no blue voters in this state. So let's go ahead and do this thing. And as it turns out, they were able to organize massive opposition to changing the Constitution in this way and hand a direct defeat, a direct facial defeat to the forces of abortion, restriction, banning, etc., and preserve whatever language it was in this Kansas Constitution that the courts had traditionally interpreted as protecting the right to an abortion. Big victory. But I present you this story from the AP. Let's see if I can't open. Oh, yeah. I got to open it up by opening a new tab so that I don't destroy things, and I can find my way back to Pocket later. But here we are. This AP story, where I guess I got it directly from the AP site. So there you go. And it's a couple days ago. If we can just get the pop-ups out of the way and scroll down and see this thing, we can give you all the information. It is a July 5th story. That's Friday. John Hanna, Hanna, is the reporter here. Headline, Kansas's top court bolsters a state right to abortion and strikes down 2 anti-abortion laws. And you might say, well, yes, of course. Didn't they just have a statewide referendum not that long ago? And I took away from Kansas what I took away from a lot of other states. Oh, yes, they specifically passed an amendment enshrining the right to an abortion. But that's not exactly how it worked in Kansas. But in other states, yes. By the way, the piece is illustrated by a picture taken outside of the courtroom, I guess, after the Supreme Court heard oral arguments that were in this case, which we now have the results in. They were argued on March 26th, and pictured here are, you'll remember, Kansas Attorney General Chris Kobach. He's still there. We don't hear very much about him anymore, but he's still there and alive and kicking. And he is chatting here with Aaron Hawley, whose name might ring a bell for you. That is Josh Hawley's wife, allegedly, but these are the two who have, circulated publicity photos of the two of them like awkward robot kissing. I don't know. You may remember the show. Anyway, so there you have it. Josh Hawley's wife and Chris Kobach teaming up to take a case to the Supreme Court and argue on March 26th that they really ought to be banning abortions in Kansas. And you might say to yourself, but hey, I thought they just had that big statewide election where they said, no, you can't do that. They did. And this story is meant to illustrate the fact that Republicans don't care about that. They are unafraid to just continue to sue and try to pass legislation in the Republican-controlled state House and state legislature that abortion should be restricted, banned, etc. And they say, I don't care that you just had a statewide election that says that this would be unconstitutional. We're going to keep trying until we're right. And they don't care how many resources they use up doing it. Although their favorite part of it probably is that the fact that they have captured the state attorney general's office means they don't have to use their own money to rack up these losses while they're waiting to make everybody else pre-wrong. They can use state money to do it instead. So here's the story. Kansas's highest court strongly reaffirmed Friday that the state constitution protects abortion access, striking down a ban on a common second trimester procedure and laws regulating abortion providers more strictly than other healthcare providers. In other words, they had their election. They declared that abortion rights were protected by the state constitution, and the Republican legislature said, oh, yeah, well, we're going to pass a ban and some restrictions that are blatantly, facially unconstitutional. We're totally going to lose this case, but who cares? And then, by the way, they take it to the Supreme Court, and does the Supreme Court... Admirably, they do the right thing, including some people who were personally opposed to abortion and nonetheless did the right thing. But did they all do the right thing? I mean, again, you understand, whether you're a lawyer or not, you've been taught about how the law works, right? If there's a big vote, the Constitution, what does it say? That we're going to protect the right to abortion or no? And the answer is yes, we're going to protect the right to abortion in the Constitution. That means you can't write laws that ban it. You will be overturned by the constitutional interpretation. That's the way it works. What do Democrats do with something like that? Democrats say, that's the Constitution, that's the state of things, that's where we'll leave it. What do Republicans do? No, we're going to legislate it anyway. Now that should be, you go to the judges, and judges, we're not ideologues, we just call balls and strikes. Constitution protects the right to an abortion. Here is a statute that says you don't have a right to an abortion. What wins as between statute and Constitution? Answer, Constitution every time. That's what they teach you in law school. 6 justices, apparently, on the Kansas Supreme Court. 5-1 decision, though, as to whether or not it's constitutional to do this unconstitutional thing. So I guess they're not completely, without basis in the Republican Party. Well, 5-1 this time, but maybe next time it'll be 4-2, and maybe the time after that it'll be 3-3, and then maybe after that we can get it to 2-4 and we can win. How long will it take? We don't care, especially as we are entitled to do this with state taxpayer money, so long as the Attorney General who presses these cases is a Republican. But that's the subtext for you to understand in this story, which continues. The pair of 5-1 decisions suggests that other restrictions, even ones decades on the books, might not withstand legal challenges. The court's dissenting justice, widely seen as its most conservative, of course, warned that Kansas is heading towards, quote, a legal regime of unrestricted access to abortion. Well, the Constitution says what it says. The courts have said what they have said about it. The voters were asked whether they wanted it that way, and they said, yes, we do. This is an immense victory for the health, safety, and dignity of people in Kansas and the entire Midwestern region. where millions have been cut off from abortion access, said Nancy Northup, president and CEO of the Center for Reproductive Rights, which represented the abortion providers challenging the two laws. The decisions came almost 2 years after an August 2022 statewide vote decisively affirming abortion rights, the first such vote after the U.S. Supreme Court's Dobbs decision in June of 2022, so just months later, that allowed states to ban abortion altogether. They were now allowed to do it in June of 2022. By August of 2022, Kansas says, we don't want to do it. Kansas voters rejected a proposed change in the state constitution, approved, of course, by the Republican-controlled legislature, to declare that the document provides no right to abortion. Republican Attorney General Chris Kobach had argued that the 2022 vote didn't matter in determining whether the two laws could stand. Like, who cares about what the state constitution says? It doesn't matter. You can do it anyway. That was his argument. Well, Justice Evelyn Wilson, one of the 3 justices appointed to the, 7-member court. How do you like that? Somebody wasn't there to participate in this decision, I guess. But I was wondering why are you setting yourself up for failure with a 6-member Supreme Court? But okay, they have a 7-member court. And Justice Evelyn Wilson, one of the 3 justices appointed to the court after its landmark 2019 decision, which was what? I don't know. But I guess it may have. Yeah, well, that was the decision, I guess, interpreting the Constitution in such a way that not only was abortion not banned, but not bannable. This goes back to 2019. Also, John Hanna's own reporting. Kansas court bolsters abortion rights, blocks ban. That back in April of 2019. The Kansas High Court declared for the first time the state constitution protects abortion rights, a sweeping ruling that blocks a ban on common second trimester methods for ending pregnancies and endangers other restrictions as well. So again, just to refresh your memory, or create one entirely, in my case, the chronology here. 2019, the Kansas Supreme Court says, we interpret the current constitution of this state as protecting the right to an abortion. 2022, this U.S. Supreme Court says, we don't. I mean, we're not talking about the Kansas Constitution, but the U.S. Constitution doesn't. We overturn Roe versus Wade. Also in 2022, the Kansas legislature then says, in the wake of this, we now would like to pass a constitutional amendment that would change things so that we could overrule and undo the 2019 Kansas Supreme Court holding that there are abortion rights under the Constitution, state constitution. We want to get rid of those. What do you think, voters? And the voters said, no way in hell, we're keeping them. So again, 2019, the state legislature says, we want to ban this procedure. Court says, no, you have the right to this procedure under the state constitution. Federal court says, we don't have any federal right to it starting in 2022. And then the Kansas legislature says, we don't care that the 2019 court decision here in Kansas said there's a right to an abortion. We think that there ought not to be. Brought this case, and they said, nope, we meant what we said. And yet they keep going. That's what the real point of all of this is. So, where we left off, Justice Evelyn Wilson, right, one of the 3 members appointed after the 2019 decision, said that while she might have dissented then, that is, she might have gone along with the anti-abortion position, she said, the people spoke with their votes. The results were accepted by the people, and Kansas showed the world how things are done in a successful democracy, wrote Wilson, an appointee of Democratic Governor Laura Kelly, a strong abortion rights supporter. Interesting. So, okay. Well, I'm not 100% sure I understand on the fly here what Evelyn Wilson's personal position here is, but the point really is that it didn't matter. It was a matter of handling the law as determined by either, if it's valid, the legislature, or the Constitution if it overrules it, or the voters directly, for that matter. Neither law struck down by the court had been enforced yet, because of the lawsuits against them by abortion providers. Other lawsuits in lower state courts are challenging restrictions on medication abortions, a ban on doctors using teleconferences to meet with patients, rules for what doctors must tell their patients before an abortion, and a requirement that patients wait 24 hours after receiving information about a procedure to terminate their pregnancies. Friday's rulings will be felt far outside Kansas, since it has attracted thousands of patients from states where abortion is all but banned, most notably Oklahoma and Texas. The Guttmacher Institute, which supports abortion rights, projected last month that about 20,000 abortions were performed in Kansas in 2023, or 152% more than they had seen in 2020. Abortion opponents argued ahead of the August 2022 vote that failing to change the state constitution would doom long-standing restrictions enacted under past Republican governors. Kansas saw a flurry of new restrictions under GOP Governor Sam Brownback from 2011 through 2018. And so the abortion opponents saying, it hurts to say we told you so to the many Kansans who were misled, in their view, by the abortion industry's assurances that it would still be heavily regulated in our state if voters rejected the 2022 amendment. They think that the populace was bamboozled into preserving their own rights, but I don't know if I agree with that. That's Danielle Underwood, spokesperson for Kansans for Life, the state's most influential anti-abortion group. Justice K.J. Wall, a Kelly appointee, did not participate in either ruling on Friday, while Justice Caleb Stegall was the lone dissenter. He was appointed by Brownback. In his dissenting opinion in the clinic regulations case, Stegall said the majority's actions will damage the court's legitimacy for years to come. An interesting play, right? Of course, they've realized that it's taking root on the federal level, that Democrats are worried about the integrity and legitimacy of the Supreme Court, so they're going to just run the same play. We lost in the state court, so it's illegitimate. Anyway, this guy, this justice says, its declarations about bodily autonomy could affect a massive swath of health and safety regulations outside of abortion, including licensing requirements for barbers. Aha! I can understand why the dramatic music is playing. I mean, one, duh, but two, yeah, their declarations about bodily autonomy could affect a massive swath of health and safety regulations. Yeah, because there's bodies involved in them. That's right. And whenever you're legislating about what can and can't happen to people's bodies at their behest, well, yeah, it's going to affect a broad swath of things. Now, watch him still miss the point. Ready for this one? Surely the government does not have a compelling interest in who trims my beard. Surely true, and that's why it was dumb to say that the whole thing, well, this could affect barbers. Well, it could. You're not allowed to stab clients with scissors, but I think that's probably already covered under assault statutes. But I mean, let's say that there's some particular reason to believe that you're stabbing them in a particularly professional way. Well, we want to ban it nonetheless because people have the right to bodily autonomy. I want my hair cut. I don't want my skin lacerated. All right. Well, what's the state's interest in who trims my beard? None. it doesn't hurt you, and you can recover from a bad beard trim very quickly. It doesn't take you out of work. It doesn't require that you wait 24 hours to have your beard trimmed, anything like that. It's just a dumb comparison, and he gets called out by it right away. Just, let the lawsuit, he goes on to say, let the lawsuits commence in this new target-rich environment. The majority has, perhaps unwittingly, put the entire administrative state on the chopping block of strict scrutiny. Others differ. Justice Melissa Standridge, also a Kelly appointee and the justice writing the majority opinion in the clinic regulations case, called Stiegel's arguments inappropriate and denigrating to women faced with decisions between childbirth and abortion. Yeah, should I, give birth? Should I carry this child to term? Can I afford to? What about illness? What about the baby's illness? My own? Sometimes a million reasons why you can't carry a pregnancy to term. Is that really the same decision as, well, where should I go to have my beard trimmed? First of all, trim your own damn beard. And second of all, what if it did regulate barbers? We already regulate barbers. They license them all over the place. Every state has barbers licensing. I don't know what you're talking about. And it's a dumb thing to say, I don't know, life-altering decision, or in a couple of weeks the whole thing will grow out anyway. It was dumb to say, as you know. All right. Anyway, Kansas doesn't ban most abortions currently until the 22nd week of pregnancy, but it requires minors to obtain the written consent of their parents or a guardian. Other requirements, including the 24-hour waiting period and what a provider must tell patients, have been put on hold. A lower court is considering a challenge to them by providers. The health and safety rules aimed specifically at abortion providers were enacted in 2011. Supporters said they would protect women's health. That's what they're aiming for, of course, though there was no evidence provided then that such rules elsewhere had ever led to better health outcomes. Providers said the real goal was, of course, to force them out of business. Standridge said in the majority's opinion on the clinic regulations that not only was there no evidence that the rules would improve patients' health, but in some cases it affirmatively contradicts that position. So they actually looked at, outcomes. She wrote that even the state's expert in the case agreed that the existing abortion care is extremely safe and comparable to care not covered by the regulations. The other law struck down by the court would have banned a certain type of dilation and evacuation, known as D&E, and it was the first state ban of its kind when it was enacted in 2015. According to state health department statistics, about 600 D&E procedures were done in Kansas in 2022, accounting for 5% of the state's total abortions. About 88% of the state's abortions occurred in the first trimester. The state has yet to release statistics for 2023. The procedure ban would have forced providers to use alternative methods that the Center for Reproductive Rights said are riskier for the patient and more expensive. So, you definitely want to have those. Justice Eric Rosen, an appointee of the former Democratic Governor Kathleen Sebelius, said in the majority's opinion on the ban that lower court evidence showed it would force patients to undergo alternative procedures that are rarely used, untested, and sometimes more dangerous or even impossible. So, medicine wants very badly to use the safer, proven methodologies. And, of course, you can't get in between a patient and their doctor because something Obamacare, how dare you, except when you can always get in between a doctor and her patient if the patient is a woman, in which case everything's just fine because they don't do their own thinking or decision making, according to Republicans. Anyway, that was an interesting story in its own right, and one I wanted to share just to sort of illustrate, you know what? I mean, even when you either amend the Constitution or successfully defend some provision of the Constitution that should leave a right firmly in the hands of the people, Republicans will press and press and press, and let's just sue and pass unconstitutional legislation. And hell, if we can, it's been working on the federal level, what if we just appoint corrupt justices and bribe them? And we'll just continue to do this until we get the decision we want not the one that the law demands. And you really kind of have to be aware of that. So, a couple of other developments of late. We can use the last segment to discuss probably the most egregious of them. And it's just another one of those stories that in another news cycle would have been the top story always and forever. But it gets lost in the flood of Trump crap because that's, what Trump sort of does with himself. And that's his aim, generally speaking. Okay, let's see. We have just a minute or so, before we have to exit on the next break. So what can we squeeze in? Oh, yes. Here's something I spent a little bit of time looking at over the weekend. I didn't do my normal 4th of July search for how many people had their houses shot up by celebratory gunfire during the fireworks. But a quick glance around the internet assured me that, of course, it did happen, and that there were, of course, also some people who actually caught the shrapnel themselves and were injured on America's great holiday. But there were also the usual batch of fireworks injuries. But as it turns out, some extraordinarily dumb ones, including people, and it's funny, the language of fireworks accident and gun accident, so frequently reported in exactly the same way in America's newspapers, as if these things were just, I don't know what's causing these accidents. They're just happening. Oh no. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So, I don't know. I don't want to get too much into the details necessarily of the various gun and fireworks accidents. I very frequently will do that. But many other very important stories to get to. Could be a lengthy discussion otherwise. But just sort of, I don't know. I was struck by the fact that both the gun accident I was reading about, in which, a fairly typical one, in which, once again, somebody has left a loaded firearm out for a toddler to find, and they have, in fact, fired it, and this time shooting someone else in the back. But that's, another frequent occurrence with toddlers and guns. But and this one was particularly egregious, if only because if I may say a word or two about this one. This was from Pennsylvania. And the incident in which a guy who was, by the way, under a restraining order, a domestic violence restraining order, essentially, that he was prohibited from having a firearm, and yet he had a firearm. But I was particularly struck by the fact that it is noted in the article that he cocked the hammer of the gun back, left it essentially in what the gun enthusiasts love to call condition zero, a semi-automatic weapon with a round chambered and the hammer cocked and the safety off, and left it on a table and there were 5 toddlers in the house or something like that, according to the report. And, the odds are one of them is going to pick it up. But he put it down, probably on a coffee table or something. Easy enough that the kids could reach it. They didn't have to do any climbing or anything. What was interesting was just his story. The cops must have come and said, well, what happened here? And the story that he told was, that he put the gun down on the table and then walked across the street to visit a neighbor. It doesn't exactly explain why he went to this neighbor's house at all. But to say, I'm just going to put this gun down and leave. I'm just going to leave the house. I'm just leaving. I mean, clearly no thought process is going on there. And they must have said, well, why did you leave the gun here? You know, like a lot of people will say, I'm going visiting to my friend's house and I don't particularly have much to worry about, but I love my guns and they protect me. I'm going to bring my gun with me. It's just my usual. I carry guns with me wherever I go. Well, he doesn't, apparently. But what was astonishing to me was that he tells the police, I got tired of holding it. Which, and I mean, the fact that it makes it into the report, I guess, means that at some point the police were like, all right, interesting. I'll write that down and it'll be part of our report and we'll tell the reporters. You got tired of holding it. That's the worst excuse for a gun accident I ever heard in my life. I got tired of holding it. I mean, like, does this guy ever walk down the street and say, you know what? My pants are too heavy. I am tired of holding this wallet and keys. I am putting them on the sidewalk and going on about my business. When I need them, I'll come back to them later. I bet he never gets tired of holding his wallet. Never gets tired of holding his car keys. Tired of holding a gun. Now, it could be boring. I'm not shooting anybody. Nobody's dying. It's not making blam, blam, blam noises. This is very boring. I'm putting it down. Now, could have put it anywhere. But, you know, and 9 times out of 10, a case like this, the guy probably also doesn't have a holster for it. It's not even clear it's his gun, but, you know, there's no holster probably. But, you know, then they stick it in their pants to be cool. But it's amazing that the guy's like, I mean, I can't imagine being so mentally checked out that you're like, well, holding this gun is cool, but it's not that awesome. You know, I'm done. I'm tired.
Boring.
Yeah, exactly. I'm tired of holding this thing. Boring. So down it goes. And anyway, so off he goes. Similarly, it was just astonishing that they don't report this as this astoundingly stupid thing happened by this total moron. And I guess they don't want to embarrass the guy any further. But I mean, you should be. You want to bring back shame as a conservative. Shame people who do stuff like this. And then, of course, you might as well throw in the people who have their fireworks accidents. This one struck me as well. You know, having been written up as an accident. Well, that's what I told the cops. So the cops wrote it in their report, and the report goes to the reporters at the newspapers, and the newspapers say, who am I to second guess a cop? It's a fireworks accident. 2 people apparently have done this recently, and in different locations. But again, there's fireworks accidents, and then there's like, what are you doing? Like, sometimes you hear people have little fireworks and they light them and they intend to light them and throw them, and the little snapping bang fireworks that don't do too much damage, but the fuse burns too quickly and it's still in their hand and it blows up and it injures them. Or sometimes they light a bigger one, they blow their hands off, their fingers off. Okay, but is that the same category? Can you just say that's an accident, but also so is taking one of these mortar-launched large shell fireworks meant to be fired by professionals, and by the way, illegal in Rhode Island, where one of these stories is from, and I guess not illegal in South Carolina, where the other story is from. But you should take one of these mortar-launched shells, which should be treated with tremendous care regardless, wherever you are, whoever you are. And also, I mentioned it's a mortar-launched shell. You should have a mortar for it when you decide to light it. So how one of these things comes into your possession and you are either without a mortar tube to launch it, or you do have one, but you decide this one, both of these people in this case, decided separately in Rhode Island and South Carolina, and probably elsewhere in the country too, that rather than launch it out of a mortar tube, I am going to not launch it at all, but you don't know that. But instead, I'm going to put the shell on top of my head and light the fuse. And I was puzzling over this a little bit over the weekend and here at home, and we decided that the thinking must have been that he thought it's like a cartoon Wile E. Coyote firework, vaguely rocket-shaped, and you light the fuse, and the thing launches up into the air like a rocket. And at worst, you'll get a little bit of fire on your hat. but don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. But the thing will launch of its own volition here. You know, it's designed to launch upward like a bottle rocket, except my head is the bottle, for one thing. But different kind of thing. Mortar launches, and, you know, I mean, obviously the guys are just not going to understand. No. What launches the thing out is the force of the explosive, the gases from the explosive charge explode inside a tube, and there's nowhere for the force to go but out the top of the tube, and it takes everything with it. And that's what's launching this thing up into the air, because they don't know physics, because they were busy drawing Van Halen logos on their notebooks and not paying attention in physics. And for all the people who are doing that, you know, hey, more power to you, except don't try to do physics later on, right? These are the guys who said, when am I ever going to use this in life? And the answer is right here, right now. It will save your life if you just pause for a moment, if you just paid any attention. But I'm wondering, like, if you're trying to explain that to people, that they would say, wow, how do you even know that? Are you in the Army or something? No, it was just, they were saying it in physics. You know, how do you know that? Who taught? How did you learn that? They were trying to teach it to you, too. You just refused to listen. But, you know, there you go. I don't know. This is some amazing stories. So I'll give you a story or two about that. I don't know. I don't know. Failure of the press sort of thing. Again, you can't get the press in this country to say, this was not an accident, or this is the sort of thing that you can avoid. And actually, it kind of overlaps with a weird observation on political reporting that I noticed over the weekend, was that somebody had said, I think very wisely, and I don't think I put the thing aside either. It's too bad. It was a good comment, but they were saying, Trump, he counts on it being common knowledge that he's a jerk and an a-hole and doesn't know what he's doing and is uncaring and abusive to people, so that when he's uncaring and abusive to people again, the media just say, who cares? Everybody knows he's abusive and a moron, and we don't really need to report that or analyze that now. We can just say what he did and just move on. It's just Trump being Trump at this point. Whereas if any other candidate were to say these things, you'd think that they would be reported all over the place. But I have a story that contradicts that as well. We'll get that. This is where I'm going eventually. But the idea was, it's just Trump being Trump. We don't need to spend any time or linger on it. And in fact, you see that all the time. Like he was saying, every time there's a hurricane, because we're currently experiencing that now. Hurricane Beryl, which reached like Category 5 while it was over the Caribbean, has apparently made landfall in Texas. So they're dealing with the effects of the earliest ever powerful Category 5 hurricane, although it's not a 5 anymore. It comes ashore as a 2, I think, which is still pretty serious. And as you'll see in the newspapers, they'll still tell you every single time what to do. You should get batteries, and you should be stockpiling water, and you should maybe think about evacuating, and all the things that they tell you every time a hurricane comes. No one ever says, a hurricane, old news. It's just hurricanes being hurricanes. We don't have to tell you anything. You'll figure it out. They warn you every single time, and they should, both with Donald Trump being Donald Trump and other Republicans being the way they are. And every time a toddler picks up a gun and fires it, kids can reach those guns, even if you put it on top of the refrigerator. And when they do, yes, they can pull the trigger. And no, you shouldn't put it down on the table because you get tired of holding it. And no, you can't hold fireworks in your hand or launch them off of your head. We will try to tell you this. The admirable program going on, by the way, when I go around looking for celebratory gunfire accidents. Now I see, this is terrific. I see more reporting ahead of July 4th of the announcements of local police departments warning people of the dangers of celebratory gunfire and that you will be arrested for doing it if they catch you, than I do see stories of damage done from celebratory gunfire, which is fantastic and absolutely the way it ought to be, and means that the press can do this stuff, but for whatever reason is not doing this stuff. What are some of the things that they're not doing? Some of the things they're not doing is paying enough attention to the current, and I mean, there's really just no reason in the world why you wouldn't be paying attention to a story like this, because it involves the current lieutenant governor, the incumbent lieutenant governor of North Carolina, Republican, Mark Robinson, now running for governor, of course, on the platform that some folks just need killing. There's some people out there you're just going to have to kill. We've gotten to that point now that we're campaigning on the people who stand in the way of what we want as conservatives and Christians. You're just going to have to kill them. P.S. Let's also put the 10 Commandments in every classroom. Thou shalt not tell me who should and shouldn't be killed, because I know better than God. And some folks just need it. That happened. It's a real thing. It's covered. I can tell you because I'm reading it in the newspaper. But you would think that would be a bigger story, like always and forever. Yes, of course, it's not in the presidential race. But I mean, the guy's an incumbent lieutenant governor and he's running for governor. Some folks need killing. North Carolina lieutenant governor takes Christian nationalism to dangerous low. This a piece by Sarah Posner in MSNBC. I also put something else together. What was the other? Oh, right. Well, yes. Maybe it's best to go to Sarah Posner for this one, because we otherwise are going to Amanda Marcotte, which is, while always a pleasure, I'd like to mix it up a little bit here. Sarah Posner, just as good and covers things just as well. So let's add another voice, a different voice, to the familiar roundup here. Some folks need killing. It says here, Sarah reports it this way, on the Sunday before the 4th of July. This has taken a while to make it into the news. Yeah, yes, everybody's aware of Project 2025 now. That's good. Are we aware that Republicans are campaigning on murder? Not aware enough. Here, though, Sunday before the 4th of July, Mark Robinson, the Republican nominee for governor, stood on a church pulpit, by the way. Why didn't you get thrown out of this church? On a church pulpit, and called for the extrajudicial killing of people he considered to be enemies of Christian America. Sure. Republicans continued support for and promotion of Robinson's candidacy and show how the GOP and the religious right have mainstreamed calls for violence in the name of Christian nationalism. Here it is. Straight up. The address, first reported by the New Republic's Greg Sargent, was part of God and Country Sunday at Lake Church in White Lake, North Carolina. God and country. Kill people in this country because they oppose you. We now find ourselves struggling with people who have evil intent, Robinson declared in announcing his evil intent, adding that, quote, some folks need killing. It's a matter of necessity. Well, he compared those supposed enemies on the American left to Nazis in World War II, because Nazis are so leftist, right? Thanks, Jonah. We didn't argue and capitulate and talk about, well, maybe we shouldn't fight the Nazis that hard. No, they're bad. Kill them. Well, I'm in agreement when it comes to Nazis attempting to take over the world, I have to tell you. But when it comes to that guy voted for a different candidate than me, well, you know, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, sir. Well, anyway, the state's would-be governor had no qualms about marshaling state power to do this, by the way. Time to call out, those guys in green, Army, I assume, and go have them handle it. Or those boys in blue, police, and have them go handle it. Cops, Army, whatever, domestic, foreign, who cares? They're opponents of mine, and they just need killing. The exact identity of the folks who deserved death was, of course, unclear. There are, quote, wicked people doing wicked things, torturing and murdering and raping, Robinson said. But he clearly had in mind a far broader spectrum of leftist foes, warning about those, quote, making 1776 a distant memory. That's time. That's the issue you have here. And those advancing the tenets of socialism and communism. All right, so murder, raping, and believing in a different economic system. All need killing, as you can tell. Cameron McGill, the church's pastor, this is your fault, sir, defended Robinson. Without a doubt, those he deemed worthy of death were those seeking to kill us, McGill told the New Republic, claiming that Robinson certainly did not imply the taking of any innocent lives. You're guilty, of course, if you prefer a different economic order. The pastor, in other words, gave Robinson his permission to deem some fellow citizens worthy of death, based only on conspiratorial lies that such people want to kill Christians. Robinson, an unabashed Christian nationalist, has a long history of extremist and bigoted positions, promoting conspiracy theories and making racist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, and transphobic attacks on fellow Americans. He launched his political career, in fact, by attacking gun control and ridiculing survivors of the 2018 shooting at the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, which is, of course, how murdery Trader Green started her political career as well. He has expressed support for the 1970 National Guard shooting of anti-Vietnam War protesters at Kent State University. A widespread, everybody's, you know what, we should have shot more of them. Okay, support for this. Let's see, he has denied the Holocaust. He has called for trans women to be arrested for using women's restrooms. Robinson's supporters on the Christian right treat his vicious, bigoted attacks as evidence of his heroic stands against, quote, woke enemies of Christian America. The church introduced Robinson, who was fresh off an appearance at the Road to Majority conference hosted by the Faith and Freedom Coalition in Washington, D.C., with a clip of his appearance at this high-profile event for Republican heavyweights, including former President Donald Trump. In the segment, Robinson attacked the media as anti-American. Not him, but the media, saying, "I don't care about your plans and your schemes to bring this nation down with your Democratic friends. Why? Because Jesus Christ is still on the throne." Well, okay. In a friendly interview between McGill and Robinson before the candidate gave his speech, the pair reiterated Christian nationalist dogma that the founders intended America to be a Christian nation, and that the separation of church and state was intended to protect the church from government interference, but not stop the church from interfering in government, or influencing, as they say, government. You cannot tell me we can separate our government from the laws of God, from the Bible, said Robinson. I'm sure I can't tell you that, but all right. Our Constitution is based on the Word of God. I don't care what anybody says. At one point in the interview, McGill told Robinson that he has an anointing. I don't even know, like that. They have such odd speech patterns, but okay. McGill told Robinson that he has an anointing. With that endorsement, Robinson took the pulpit for his speech. Like, I don't know, you're anointed. Okay, you have an anointing? All right. Well, he wasn't. This is the guy. Now, these guys might know not to launch or try to launch a firework off your head because of the way mortars work. Maybe they served in the Army. Maybe they understand the physics of it. Maybe they paid attention in physics, but they didn't pay attention in an English class, I guess. Or maybe they did. And they're just, you're all wrong about being able to say that someone has an anointing. Anyway. This is far from the first time Robinson has used the violent language of warfare to pit MAGA Republicans like himself against others. In 2021, he said in a speech that he was born, quote, to be one of God's freedom fighters, unquote, in order to, quote, literally make war on the devil, unquote. And by devil, he means you. He warned that he wanted to make, quote, the literal foundations of hell tremble, and I want this nation to join me in doing it. Okay. Well, that same year, Robinson said in another speech that Christians and conservatives, quote, or must, quote, get as bold and unafraid and warlike in spreading the truth in this nation as the people who have been spreading the lies that are currently destroying it, unquote. But in those instances, Robinson stopped short of endorsing murder. That's the difference. Explicitly advocating for supposed enemies of Christian America to be killed on a church pulpit, no less, really from a church pulpit, although I'm sure he'd be happy to kill them on one too, is a clear and dangerous escalation of Christian nationalist support for spiritual warfare against demonic enemies. Many promoters of spiritual warfare have long insisted, citing Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, that they are not talking about actual war with flesh and blood, but rather a battle against principalities and powers. Principalities, sure, whatever. And powers that takes place solely in the realm of spirituality and prayer. Yet Robinson's newly explicit calls for killing perceived enemies show just how seamlessly Christian nationalist extremists can glide into promoting real violence. Trump wanted to shoot racial justice protesters in the wake of the police murder of George Floyd in 2020. Robinson, who could be now North Carolina's next governor, wants to get the guys in green or the boys in blue to handle unspecified wicked people. It's all part of the MAGA quest to upend democracy and replace it with far-right authoritarianism. Robinson is merely taking the lead on turning this project into a twisted Sunday school lesson for Christian nationalists. Yeah, pretty much. Well, that's one way of approaching it. I'm wondering whether Amanda Marcotte's approach to this is a good addition on top of it. But let me leave it there for the day. Perhaps we can, I'll review it and again see if there's, she draws some other interesting parallels and brings in some other points along the way. But maybe our remaining time is better used with one or two other stories, including, I won't have time for this one. But what if I throw out this one, which is also very interesting, and we didn't get a chance to discuss the other day, and is from Steve Bannon, also writing, of course, at MSNBC, who has this intriguing headline from the middle of last week, July 3rd, just before the break. So Wednesday, Trump still struggling, of course, with the plain meaning of exoneration. Yeah, if you were wondering, what does Trump make of the Supreme Court's ruling on his immunity claims? He jumps straight to, well, as we told you, he's already filed to try to have his conviction overturned in the New York case. But not only does he want it overturned, he's using the word incorrectly, of course, and saying, I've been exonerated. Donald Trump has an underappreciated tell. Every time he claims to have been exonerated, he's lying. Indeed, it's a surprisingly long list, Steve reminds us. It's been nearly 5 weeks since a New York jury found Donald Trump guilty of 34 felonies, though the former president is still awaiting sentencing, and now that's even delayed even further. According to the original plan, the Republican criminal was set to learn his fate next week. That would have been Thursday of this week, sentencing. But that plan has since changed. The judge in the case approved a delay until at least September 18th, allowing Trump's lawyers to review the potential impact of the Supreme Court's immunity decision. As USA Today reported, the presumptive GOP nominee responded to the news in an overly excited way. Donald Trump's sentencing in his New York hush money case was delayed to September 18th to address if the historic conviction should be thrown out after the Supreme Court's Monday ruling that presidents enjoy broad immunity from criminal prosecution. Total exoneration, Trump wrote on Truth Social after the news broke, although the delay doesn't exonerate him in the case. They're just, remember, this is your sentencing. It's something else to say, I'm totally exonerated by the fact that I'll be sentenced on a different day. Of course, you see what he's aiming at here. The same online missive added, it is clear that the Supreme Court's brilliantly written and historic decision ends all of crooked Joe Biden's witch hunts against me, including the White House and DOJ-inspired civil hoaxes in New York, which isn't even what he's awaiting sentencing on. Those were criminal. Anyway, at this point, we could talk about why the Supreme Court's ruling in Trump versus the United States was not brilliantly written, why Trump's hush money case isn't over, why there's literally no evidence of President Joe Biden being crooked, why Trump's legal problems are neither witch hunts nor hoaxes, why the White House has nothing to do with the former president's prosecutions, and why the Justice Department is unrelated to the Republicans' criminal case in New York. We could even pause to marvel at the lie-to-word ratio, which was quite extraordinary, and which reflected Trump's fractured relationship with reality. But what stood out as especially notable was Trump's latest claim to total exoneration. The truth, of course, is that the Supreme Court concluded that official presidential acts are immune from prosecution, but that's not the same thing as total exoneration. In the hush money case, jurors still found the Republican defendant guilty of crimes unrelated to Trump's official duties. In fact, much of the case focused on the events that predated his inauguration. At no point has any judge or court wiped the slate clean, undoing the jury's verdict. Trump's claims to the contrary were absurd, but they were also familiar. For those who've kept an eye on the former president's rhetoric over time, he has some unmistakable tells. When Trump tells stories, for example, about big burly men who profess their love for him while crying, he's lying. When he vows to release information in 2 weeks, he's lying. And similarly, when the Republican uses the word exoneration, he's lying. And at this point, he says, let's revisit some of our earlier coverage and take a stroll down memory lane. And it's time for us to play the music, which means let's get the hell out of here. But let's look at a couple of them while we fade to black here. In March of 2018, Trump claimed that the House Intelligence Committee had completely exonerated him in the Russia scandal. That wasn't true. And there are, of course, links to prove everything. June 2018, Trump said the Justice Department Inspector General's office had totally exonerated him in the Russia scandal. Both wrong and kind of bonkers. February of 2019, Trump claimed the Senate Intelligence Committee had exonerated him in the Russia scandal. That also wasn't true. March 2019, a month later, Trump claimed the judge in a Paul Manafort trial exonerated him. Not true. June of 2021, Trump claimed he'd been totally exonerated by testimony from former White House counsel Don McGahn, largely the opposite of the truth. February 2023, Trump insisted that a special grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia, had rewarded him with total exoneration. Not only did that not happen, same special grand jury criminally indicted him soon after. June of 2023, Trump published an item to his social media platform declaring he'd been totally exonerated in the classified documents scandal. That also led to a federal indictment. June of 24, exonerated for referencing the very fine people he saw protesting in Charlottesville. And July of 2024, total exoneration in the hush money case, which didn't make any sense at all. Does it every time.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, and now time for you to listen to Justice Putnam with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, for which I'm sure everything is in top working condition. Yes, all right. Trump's prosecutions can still move forward, we're told, despite the total exoneration, I guess, and despite the Supreme Court's immunity ruling. Find out what he's got to tell you about that next.